Hello, welcome to Herding Cats episode 6. Tom, please introduce the topic of the episode.
Yeah, hi everybody, welcome to another show. I'm Tom Jones, this is Silver Saramal, and today we're going to be talking about art versus design and what that means for video games. I think in some ways it could be art and design, and that should be the aim because you're trying to bring those two groups together to make a game. But often in the industry, they can be kind of competing forces, rival forces, different sides, which obviously isn't healthy. So we're going to talk about our experiences and perhaps ways to help stop that from happening. And yeah, we'll see how we get on. As always, any questions, please fire away and we'll try and answer them as we go. So yeah, because I've done the introduction, I get to just fire this back at Silver now. So what's your experience like in the mobile industry, Silver?
Well, I feel like the more commercial the industry we're talking about, the less there is talk about art. Sorry about the noise from the background. It's a busy street.
The biker gang going crazy.
Yeah. So mobile games is super commercial. The talk about art is only on pragmatic terms of, it's fulfilling the purpose of assets, and only lately has artistic expression become a more important topic as studios are finding their own identities and they have a stronger art department, for example, and it is a very recent development. It's a welcome one, but also it is always going to struggle a little bit because the nature of the business is about having a statistical edge in marketing rather than an artistic edge, unless you are doing an indie game, which is a very small segment of the mobile games industry. I have to say that one of the most known mobile games, like Monument Valley, was super artistic.
It's also like one guy as well, wasn't it? Pretty much. So
something like that. And while it was super popular, it wasn't like the most groundbreaking financial success what you can achieve with mobile games as well. So
so with mobile stuff, is the design like pretty much, does that stuff get locked down fairly early? I know obviously we talked previously about the turnaround times being much quicker, so like I imagine there are slightly kind of tighter briefs and very targeted design in terms of what the game's trying to do. Is that true, or is that completely naive on my part?
No, you're right. It's true, but just like every other games industry, these designs keep changing all the time because the industry moves forward so fast.
Yeah.
And what might have been a good idea, when the production started, or looking at a reference game that, let's do the same game as there's out there, but make it, with one extra feature. In that 1 year of development time, the competitor that's already out there has released probably 5 new features and has an edge that needs some different kinds of shuffling around then. And most of the time it is the design that keeps shuffling the most, and for that reason art is needs to be very flexible for change.
Yeah,
it has to be able to go around whatever design needs there are, to adjust fast, to scale up fast as well. It's almost impossible to get it all planned out a year or two advance and then stick to it.
So what systems did you have in place to ensure that the art team was like agile and that they were willing and happy to keep changing stuff and on board with that whole kind of mentality?
Well, I think it's about communicating that as the goal from the get-go. It can't come as a surprise to anyone in the middle of the project that this thing has to pivot on a moment's notice if we feel like it. But at the same time, it has to be something that the art team is also in control of and able to be part of the conversation. I think that's like a sign of a healthy team, that everybody doing the game or the app have a great understanding why we need to pivot now, and not just like somebody says we change everything.
Yeah, so it's managing the message.
Yeah.
I guess one thing as well, I've always thought about it, in some ways it's like changing design or changing anything feels like can feel like a massive blow, can feel like quite a negative thing because you're throwing away stuff and that feels bad. But actually instead, like, I think in some ways it's good to try and look at it as a positive thing. Like, without it, the game wouldn't be as good. So we're doing it to make the game better, and everyone wants to make a good game. So it's all part of doing that. And actually, like you say, getting people on board with the idea that you're not just making work for your own portfolio, you're a production artist working towards a product. Like, that is true. You're being paid to work on something for a studio, and they determine what you work on. So they say, do it again. Do it again, unfortunately. I wouldn't spell it out in that kind of candid terms, but the idea that exactly that you're kind of working towards a bigger thing and you're a cog in that kind of system, I think it's important. And then,
I agree. And very important is to remember that you're not just part of the system, but you're also a game designer, not only an artist. Working on a game is important for everybody who's pushing the game forward to understand why the game is behaving. What is the best experience for the player? And if you have a good case for the art to be the thing that needs to be pushed more, then that's great. But it still has to come with the thought of gameplay first.
Yeah, totally.
And that's something that a lot of games artists forget as well, is that they are, as I said, they're making a game, a product first, and then second only an art.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started getting pretty good at that at Sony, mainly through kind of trial and error over multiple projects, and working with other teams and seeing the split between. I think it's very easy for there to become a split between a design team and an art team. Those two teams are separate. They don't communicate much. And so, the designers make something and it plays well, potentially looks like shit or it doesn't look great because they've had tight deadlines and their focus has been on design. The art team get it and go, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? It's like 20 boxes that I've got to turn into something, but have all got to be box shaped. Like, that's the running joke in the industry. So they kind of change it, but use their own license a bit, and then fundamentally just break the gameplay. So the design team get it back and go, oh, man, you just ruined what was a cool level with your stupid art. And you can kind of see how it then escalates and back and forth. Instead of it, so what we ended up doing was pairing up like an artist and a designer and sitting them next to each other. And they wouldn't necessarily always be working on the same stuff, but the first thing it did was it kind of brought the team together. It stopped it being like them against us or us against them, whatever. And it allowed the artists to see what the designers were up to in those kind of early stages and actually kind of walk a little bit in their shoes. I think there's I've come across, certainly in my experience, artists potentially thinking that design is easy and that they need to put in a bit more thought about what they're making, and that actually Yeah, basically all they've done is just create a room full of cubes, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And it's not true. It's really hard. If you try and design something, it's so hard. And what you don't see is the number of iterations that room full of cubes. And actually, I think that's kind of an old thing. I think we've moved away from that anyway. But as an example, like how many iterations that's gone through to get to where it is, and the amount of it been play tested and tweaked, and particularly because we used to work on like FPS games, so that you add something to a block line of sight, or you make sure there's appropriate cover and all that stuff, like these micro tweaks, you just don't see. You just get the kind of end product. And I've tried at points to do design work and artwork at the same time. Like, go, right, I need something here. What's it going to be? Try and design it. And it's just overwhelming because you can't really move forward. So at some point you have to go, man, I need to try and just have like an overall picture, but I'm going to have to just place some cues to move forward. I think that's one of the real difficulties. So yeah, exposing people to the process. And actually, when there's issues, getting them to try and resolve them together, I think it's really important too. And then the final thing, what we tried to do was when the art team got the like grey box level or white box or design of art, whatever you want to call it, we'd ask them to like go away, think about what they wanted to do, and then if they were like fundamentally changing anything, to go and speak to the designer and actually have a handover as well, so to understand how the level played. And also play the game lots, so they get what it is, like you say, understand what it is they're making.
Yeah, we did something similar with Crytek and Rise as well, where we paired one level designer, one environment artist, and one concept artist to own a level. And usually, because we had a smaller amount of concept artists, one concept artist owned anything from 3 to 6 levels with different level designers. So it's concept artists were like mini art directors essentially. But what was nice was that the level designer and the environment artist could, easily then start whiteboxing the level, designing, fun for it. And I think in a AAA game, it's a little bit easier to bring the artist into the design process, because a lot of it is if it is an open world game, or if it's like an environment-based game where you can jump around stuff, that's something that the environment artist can also pluck out easily in the level editor, because the editor is so good. You can almost, you're designing the game there. But with mobile games, a lot of the game design is very much stats and collection based. It's about, optimizing the amount of like levels you have to unlock, levels you have to play. So there's not so much creative expression for the environment artists with the design part. It's a lot of it is done in Excel sheets and more mathematically devised,
Right.
and then prototyped in a game maker or something like that before it's built properly in Unity by the engineers and then the artists as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It has a different kind of pipeline as well. It's still important for everybody to play though, and give a good feedback on the flow of the game and how does the overall progression feels like. But it's more on the level designer's hats at that point.
Yeah, I thought your point about that having concept artists part of like a small kind of crack team is quite an interesting one. It just reminded me, I've forgotten we actually did that for our last project at Sony. We made rigs for VR, and actually they ended up working as a really cohesive kind of glue between the two teams, because they were able to be very agile, very quick at conveying like a vision for a level that the designers could get behind, and doing like quick updates. It's much quicker to do like a sketch or a paint than it is to go in and do that in 3D. And actually it meant that they understood the levels from quite an early point as well, so were able to help like problem solve or kind of point out when things were added from the designers that looked odd or would be hard to art that they could kind of work out a slightly more, aesthetic shape or a function for that thing. So that actually worked really well.
So I have questions from the chat, Tom. One from Kaya. Hello, guys. Which do you put more value on when looking at artist portfolios, quality of art or design? And we have also Hessel Boomer. Hey, guys, I'm excited to see what you got to say about these things. I'm a game art student and would love to learn more about this stuff. Welcome, Kaya and Hessel, and also Dustfulia Pranks. Is this the rendering optimization advanced CGI transmission stream? No, it is not, Dustfulia. You're in the wrong place.
Yeah, we could try. I don't think it'll be very good.
So let's start with the portfolio reviewing. What do you put more value on?
So in terms of firstly, when I think of art and design, I'm kind of primarily talking about environment art. I think that's the biggest crossover, certainly from like my experience with AAA games. Characters obviously work separately, and whilst having design requirements, it's a bit more kind of insulated from the main game. So environment artists, I think, actually one of the things I used to place a lot of value on when looking at portfolios was like environmental storytelling, like an understanding of the space. You can kind of get a sense for the design of the space and how someone has, arted around that. So I think it's, for me, in some ways, like being a good a storyteller within your scene is a good way of giving objects purpose. So it's kind of like that your design hat, but it's taking it and applying a filter to it that goes, well, okay, what is this cube? Maybe it's a fish tank, and the fish tank smashed and the fish are flapping all over the floor and now there's glass everywhere and that leads a trail to the door or something, and suddenly you go, oh, okay, the things are really boring, I meant really interesting, but then taking that thematic throughout the whole scene. And it's not just table, chair, separate prop. It's like there's something cohesive that ties stuff together. I think when you can do that and serve the function of design, you're making amazing environments. That's really powerful.
It's well said. That's well said.
Gonna go. That's it. I'm not gonna top
that. I myself put more value on design, but I don't think the answer is so simple. You have to first ask yourself as well, what kind of a team you're building. Are you trying to build a team of super seniors? So then the expectation is that the quality of art is also on the high level. But most importantly, whoever is asked to join the team is has to be fit visually as well. I am never trying to make the work hard for an artist unless they like really want to do that. But usually you try to play the people's strengths and see if they are good at designing certain thing, then you offer them a job at designing certain things even more. That's something to think about when if you're working on your portfolio, the kind of pieces that you put on your portfolio are what art directors use as reference on what to hire this person for. While the quality is always important as well, depending on what kind of a role in the infrastructure.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. So from my point of view, particularly when I talk about design, I mean like gameplay design as well, like designing the aesthetics of an object. It's like actual gameplay design. Obviously, first and foremost, you want people who can make really good art. If they're making really good design that doesn't look very good, they should probably be a designer. But for me, actually, what's really interesting in portfolios is if you can see like the before and after as well. If you can see a room and it's like, oh, this is what I got, and this is what we turned it into, and then actually in talking to the person, they can communicate an understanding of the requirements of that space, and ideally be like, yeah, I worked with the design team and I wanted to make this bit of cover a bookshelf, and we thought it'd be cool if then if you, I don't know, shot the books off, it destroyed the cover or something. It's like we evolved it together. That for me is like really exciting. Instead of just getting something, making it, and that's it. Come up with an idea and go back and feed that in, and then maybe between you can kind of make the whole thing even more exciting.
So this begs a follow-up question. What are the worst kind of portfolios that you saw as an art director?
I find there's just the most frustrating stuff is kind of like just a bunch of slightly generic environments. Like, here's a warehouse with a crane, and it's like, well, what is it? It's like, what kind of game is this for? What function does it have? You just made this, like, because if it's not from a game, it's just a personal project, and it's like, well, what is exciting about this? Like,
yeah,
what's the story? Warehouse can be cool, but make it like I don't know, it's the last hideout because aliens are invading, or like it's the abandoned warehouse that teenagers go to smoke pot or whatever. I don't know. But it has a story. If you haven't got, particularly if you're a student and you haven't made a game before and you just want to do environment art, give it a story that you can tell, and then actually have lots of different images of that same environment from different angles to go, okay, that's behind the forklift truck, or there's something in there. But if it's just like, here's a generic warehouse, here's a generic urban building, here's a sci-fi spaceship that is just all kind of hexagonal, and I'm just a bit like that. Everyone does that. It's like it's the equivalent of, here's an orc character, here's a lady without many clothes on. Like, we've moved on from that as an industry. So like, if your portfolio contains that stuff, don't start on something. And I'd much rather see something really small, like I say, like just a garden shed or a kitchen where something's happened and you've actually gone and had a lot of attention to detail, because that for me shows that you really think about what you're making and creating as an environment artist. And that's a far better skill than just trying to make something really big with like lots of tiling textures that just doesn't look amazing.
Some ambient storytelling, right?
Yeah, exactly. So small and focused. Think about the lighting. Like some of my favorite environments in game, like so the stuff in Edith Finch, I like the storytelling in that. It's just in a house, but it's kind of cluttered full of stuff, and that's like amazingly rich. Like the first Batman game, some of the stuff in that, and like the cells and things, was brilliant. But also one of my favorite bits from Uncharted 4 was like the house on the beach at the end. It's like they go through all these epic locations, and this house, but it's just so well done, and like just the little objects that give you an insight into their life.
Yeah.
And the lighting and the palette is just beautiful. It's like a kind of Pixar set. It's just amazingly well done, and actually turns something kind of slightly mundane into something like really amazing. So anyway, sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent.
No, that's good. It's the little things that sets things apart. It's fairly low effort to make a generic space. It takes a lot more time and effort and skill to design the personal touches and to also project the personalities of the characters who live there. And that kind of skill is extremely valuable, and that kind of thinking is extremely valuable, because the more you can do that, the less is off somebody else's head, and that's great in a team environment.
Totally, and it shows your questioning thing. Like, like asking questions is a really important skill.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're part of a team, not to be like antagonistic or like trying to always say, why is this not very good? I mean, like just asking why is this like this? What is the purpose of this space? What's the character's journey? What emotions are we trying to convey in the game? Like all games have a story, even if it's like even Overwatch as a story, right?
That's right. It's full of environment storytelling, and one of the best ones that I remember that is extremely minimalistic is Portal, and it's you linearly progressing through these little puzzles, but you got
peel it away.
There's the voice acting of the robot, but then there's these little messages on the walls that say the cake is a lie, or you come into a room that is destroyed or looks that something has happened here. It's leaving this ambient storytelling, because games are not most of the time a story medium. Sure there are some like great games from like Naughty Dog that you manages to do it as a full-blown story medium, but most of the time it is gameplay driven, and where we can put the story is the little things, the ambience, from the way the characters are dressed to the way the environment is set up, and you can pack it with information. You can make that as an artist. You can create so many stories and scenarios and places to experience without being on the way of game design. I think that's something that is underappreciated.
Yeah, totally. I think you should always think, well, like, how can I make this better? Kind of fact-finding mission to understand the space you're working on and what its function is, and then think, how can you make it better? Play it, question it, and then actually probably kind of propose your ideas if you think they're controversial.
Yeah,
but do it and showing you put some thought behind it. But I was always open to people. Well, I think I was open to people challenging what I'd asked for. And if people came to me and were like, I don't think that's a good idea, and well, if they didn't have any substance behind that, they're like, well, we don't really understand it, so I'm sticking with my reasoning. But if someone had like clearly thought about it, be like, actually, this happened, be like, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
fine. You thought about it, sure. It's a good argument. Unless I fundamentally disagree, but then at least you can have a conversation and go, well, this is why I disagree. So I think it's a really good skill, but being able to communicate the reasons why you want to do something and your ideas, but with an understanding of the constraints of the game and the level. So your idea isn't like, hey, maybe we can just have 20,000 zombies hiding in this room. So, well, don't really have the engine or the budget for that, but.
One of the things I would love for environment artists and concept artists to do more is to be more involved with sound design as well. I feel like that's a department that's often working in isolation and kind of like stamping things on it. But some of my best interactions with sound designers is that when they feel like, oh, I got to create this space with the artists or the level designers, and they as well would love to be part of that, creating that ambience and getting ideas what the environment artist wants to showcase in this area, or what is the mood that is intended for this area as well.
I think it's a really good point. Yeah, in terms of like, if you think about how you're theming a place, think about it in terms of like storytelling and visuals and what's going to look cool, but B, what sounds things make, Instead of a TV, is the TV on, or it's statics, it's making a noise, or or have something that you can pin some like sound effects around at a level that acts as like a proper marker.
Yeah. So let's get back to the philosophical question of art versus design a little bit. One trend that I've constantly seen through my years in the games industry is that games artists don't consider themselves artists. Often they feel like the word artist is used as an offensive word. It's not. It's kind of like, I'm not an artist. I'm a professional. I'm a craftsperson. I hear that quite often, and I understand that as well, because it is about craft. But funny thing to me is that most of these people started out as with the intention of being an artist at some point, and there's a flow of thoughts that is being changed constantly as well.
So how are they differentiating between craftsmen and artists? What's the
Well, work for pay is one.
all right.
One is the creative expression versus the skill level that is used. Like the emphasis on making things with extremely high level of skill versus having a strong idea.
So like a carpenter or something.
Kind of like, and I feel like maybe it depends a little bit of the department as well. Concept artists tend to have more artistic freedom.
Yeah.
For example, our art directors, you'd think we have artistic freedom, but it's a whole nother conversation. And with modelers, it's usually more of a carpenter in a sense that the plans have been laid out.
Yeah.
And have been approved. And if you deviate from it, you better have a really good reason, because otherwise you're going to have Thor's hammer on you from all the producers, all the art directors, all the concept artists as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I think some of it is the terminology for job roles, because you're right. If you're making props or assets, are you really an artist? I don't know. You just make something to a brief, which is still a really good skill. But there's definitely crossover, because there's like observation skills and there's like understanding of shape and form, depending on how detailed the concept is, like understanding of like color and aesthetic choice. But yeah, arguably you could just be a 3D modeler at that point, or an asset artist. Yeah, it's an interesting one. For me, that kind of artistic aspect comes in what you add. It's what differentiates you from a robot and an actual person doing that job. And so I'd hope the person is looking at the brief and questioning it. Like I say, thinking about how that will look in the scene, or if the brief is the whole scene, how to add life to it, how to make it more exciting. And like what we always used to say, we get a grey box environment and be like, okay, well maybe what happens if you take the walls away? Like, what do you need the walls? Go and speak to design and find out if you need the walls. And they just made it because it's they started off with a cube for a room, but like, do we need walls at all? We don't need walls. What's outside? And like, question all that stuff. Suppose I've got a wall, I'm going to make it a brick wall. And that for me is like the artistic vision and the ability to kind of question and be creative. So I don't know. I think if you're literally just taking plans and making them, you're probably doing yourself in the game a disservice. Maybe that's harsh. But equally, some people really like that. It's nice sometimes just sit down, have all the information, and you don't have to think.
Yeah.
I like that. I used to really like UVing, which is like, we just listen to music and you just go into a different part of your brain. But I think if you want to be the best you can, that's unfair, because you can be really good at making that stuff, right? So if that's your thing, be the best you can be at that thing. That's perfectly valid. But I think if you want to contribute to the game in a wider sense, then I think it's important to kind of push and question and do all those kind of other things.
Yeah, there's a question of a little bit of like, what kind of ego do you have, but also personal ambitions as well. Because the more influence you want to have, the more pushing it requires from you personally, and it might not always be worth the stress.
No. The only counterpoint I'd say is like follow up kind of previous saying. I think if your thing is just making assets, you kind of need to make sure you're like the fastest or the best, like ever. Like, because so many games now outsource that stuff. It's really easy to make a brief for a table or a cargo crate or whatever, and send it to an outsourced company. And yeah, you might not get it it might not come back as good as if you did it internally, but it'd be kind of 80% there, and you could do a bit of polish, and you get it for half the price, and you get it with a whole bunch of other stuff, and you can target their delivery. So I think that the need for having people in-house to do that stuff is sadly kind of disappearing a bit more. Which is actually what is hard. It's hard to outsource game design and concepting and like even like environment art to a degree. I think because there's so much more to understand. It's much harder to encapsulate into a brief.
True.
And like whenever we've tried to like outsource whole levels, it's just been incredibly hard. And like you kind of far more work to then do internally as well to get them up to the same pace.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe that's not true of everything, but certainly in my experience in studios, I know, particularly like big AAA games, it's just like a no-brainer, that stuff.
It makes a lot of sense as well to keep in-house the things that requires many people's decision making, well as a singular asset like a table. You said it's we can take that for granted and doesn't need everybody's input. So when you guys started Röki, what were your personal ambitions when it came to the question of art versus design?
I think we certainly. I think art probably took more of a center stage. A, because that's our background, so we're kind of naturally more comfortable there. But B, also I think we were like, we're coming off a fairly lengthy stint in the industry as art directors and kind of, in theory, defining visions for games and hoping that and hopefully making them look really good with a team, obviously. So I think there was some kind of pressure there to not just be like, hey, we can finally do our own stuff again. It's just stick man on paper, like, try to do something that we I think there was a level of pride, right? We want to do something that was visually really good. But then, and I think the design side, I think that's evolved as we've gone on. Partly because I think our ambitions for the game at the start were maybe slightly smaller, and that's kind of evolved as just we've got into it because it's been fun and there's opportunities there. But like for me personally, I've kind of done a lot of the design stuff in the game. I think maybe that's having done a lot of environment art stuff in my career. Those two have always been quite linked, so I'm kind of interested and have experience of that area. But there's not been the tension because we're a small team, and so like as I said earlier, like that's why I know it's really hard to think of both things. But yeah, I quite enjoyed doing that side of things, definitely. So that's kind of grown as we've gone on. You kind of begin to appreciate how hard it is. I think one of the things that it's obviously very different from our AAA career, but one of the things that we've kind of stayed true to is like, just don't be afraid to change stuff. And I think maybe through inexperience, we've changed more than perhaps not needed to, but would have otherwise. If we started a game now, I think we'd go into it on a better footing. So I've certainly learned a lot from what we've been doing.
What would you do differently?
It's nothing specific. I think some of it's like just design rules and the design loops, and it's like games like a puzzle game, making sure that you see if you need an object to complete a puzzle, that you kind of see that object first before you find out the puzzle, so you don't just that you see it but can't get it, so that it creates a kind of a sense of excitement and agency for the player rather than you just picking it up and then getting to the puzzle and you've already got the answer. Stuff like that, which sounds kind of obvious, but it's very easy to overlook. But yeah, in general, we found whenever we've gone in and gone like, we need to change the design. It's going to be a little bit painful, but let's just do it. It's always been better. Always been better. So I'm kind of a big advocate of that. And I mean, it helps also that half the time a lot of the work lost is my stuff. So you just go, well, that's fine. That's the difference. It's nice not to have tell the whole team that, yeah, the level's changing or the stuff they've been working with 3 months is no longer valid.
Yeah. What would you like the game be known for? For its art or for its design?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really interesting question because we've got, we get a lot of, not a lot. So because obviously we've been at E3 and there's been write-ups about the game. So like that, the art always gets plaudits, which is amazing, but almost to the point now where I'm slightly numb to it. I'm just like, okay, sure. Yeah, it looks good, whatever. What about the rest? So I probably have kind of migrated away from caring. I do. If someone said the art's shit, I'd care. But at the moment, the baseline is it looks good. So I'm like, I've kind of moved on from that. So for me, I think the story, I think I'm quite attached to in a way because that's something Alex and I kind of came up with together, and that's grown as the project's grown. So that I find really interesting, like the experience of being in the game. But yeah, certainly the puzzles and design, I'm nervous. That's probably the most nervous about that aspect because it's also a much harder thing to quantify. Like you can kind of tell if something looks good, particularly, and it's a very easy thing to get feedback on. And people happily comment on, oh, well, that looks pretty, right? So you can get a beat for that. And you can whack something up on social media, and you can get a response. But like gameplay, particularly when it's puzzle orientated, it's really hard because you've designed it, so you know what to do. So you can't tell if it's hard, really, or fun, or like just too obtuse, or like you kind of can have a vague awareness, and you obviously learn more as you go. But that for me is the fascinating thing, like particularly when we sent it to QA and like some user testing, is to see what people like. And that actually I find the most gratifying thing probably. People are like, oh, that bit of gameplay was really good. So
if you were a young art director going to the industry for your first art director job, how would you handle the question of art versus design?
I'd get to know the design team very well. Get to know, well, I mean, it depends. In theory, you kind of be working with like a creative director or game director or something like that. But yeah, become their like ally, work together, and start at the top and show that to your team. And then I think I would look at, it's where it gets tricky, right? Because you kind of want to look at how the studio is. Depends how big the studio is, how big the teams are. But look at how they work. Are they separate? Are they set up in a way that they can communicate easily? How are the kind of schedules managed so that they're working on stuff? Is there crossover period? Is there time allocated for there to be a handover from one team to the other? Is there time allocated for reviews with both teams? Like that kind of stuff. I think you can tell pretty early on whether it's going to be a real team effort where everyone's involved and that's a kind of studio culture, or whether actually the design team's at one end of the studio and the art team's at the other end and they never talk. And like if that's the case, you're going to have a struggle. And like the worst thing I think you can then do is you obviously will get attached to the art team and you start to kind of agree with all their issues and you become like de facto head of that, army against the other army. I'm using extreme language, but
it's true. It is a mob mentality.
And that's where I think you have to, day one, try and understand how the setup is and suggest changes if you feel like it's going to go down a bad path. But that's obviously tricky if you're very junior. But
it's very true that one thing that is overlooked is that pretty much everybody who's making the game thinks games as a form of art, because they love games. So even level designers, engineers, they want to create art. They have their own disciplines of doing that without design or coding, but the end result is that they wish to do something that they're proud of, and everybody wants to do it as a group, and it's important to remember to connect the dots before it gets into that faction mentality of us versus them.
Totally. And then like it all sounds a bit like, if you've not experienced it, it all sounds a bit extreme and like like playground mentality. But
it is, but it's
can happen really easily, and humans are very close to just being dicks all the time. Right? Like, it's something we could all do, reminding ourselves of more often.
Having 10 people agreeing with each other all the time, that's extremely hard. Having 200 people, it's even harder. Then as time goes on, it becomes more harder and harder as well, because people wear down. They get tired with production and start to get more annoyed by certain issues that keep coming up again. So it is playground mentality, because making games is hard.
It really is.
I have a question from the chat as well. Have you personally had to be the person who brought the art and design teams together?
Yeah, a little bit on some like early projects we worked on. I mean, it's kind of where I've got the experience of it going badly. I think unfortunately I was kind of in a position to be able to see it happening, so it wasn't like I was embedded and part of the problem. I wasn't art director then, I was just kind of an environment lead, but I think that it's very much like and then some of the issues weren't to do with our team either, because we were new to the project. So it's kind of like, okay, this is a bit toxic, let's try not to do this, let's make an effort to speak to design and stuff. And then from then, I think it's a lot of the things we just talked about, that if you were a kind of junior art director, what to look out for.
Yeah.
Some of those things I'm aware of, because over time the systems we put in place at Sony to do with seating and team setup and all that stuff, that you just don't, I don't know, you never really think about it in terms of like, I mean, it's more I guess art management in some ways. So if you've got a studio manager and art manager, that's something they could probably help with. But I think it's foolish to ignore all that, because actually it's a big factor in making your team productive. And perhaps something like, in hindsight, all those extra things, like even working environment and desk setup and personality types that I talked about before, I think play quite a big part. And I wish I'd kind of had a bit more time or spent more time looking at that side of things as well. Because I think you can really maximize the success of your team if you understand their motivations a bit more. It's like being proper kind of leader, I guess.
Yeah, as a junior, I've been part of the mob that was very vocal about attacking another department. It's the older I get, I regret more. But that's that means I have firsthand experience of how a stressful environment can change people into something that they're normally not. So, but also that helped me to later realize what to look out for.
Can happen really easily. It's nothing like a common cause, and if that cause is like an agreement, and all the better.
Yeah,
and it just becomes the norm. When I first started at Sony, there was people I kind of naturally started hanging out with who were just a bit negative about stuff. It's weird. I'm quite upbeat. I've just come from university. Like, it's obviously pretty good to me. And it just like wears you down. I think after about 3 months, so I need to kind of stop hanging out with them, because it's just making me a bit depressed.
Yeah,
you can tell they've just been doing it for a long time, and it's just their way of communicating.
Yeah. And later on, later on, a few times I've had to put the art team together with the product. Usually the art team gets along with the engineers really, really well, but it's mostly the product and design that is also figuring out the game, and hence it's harder to explain the vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most common cause. It takes time, takes effort, it takes a lot of patience, but those relationships can be mended, and everybody can remember that we're not curing lives, we're doing fun.
Quite. And actually just acknowledging that, like you said, it is hard. It's hard. Everyone's trying to do a good job as well, right? No one's deliberately trying to make someone else's life harder. Everyone's just trying to make a good game. So you're kind of all pushing in the same direction.
Exactly.
So why not try and do that really together? Yeah.
So,
and actually, the one last thing I'd say, actually, it's very rare you can have a game that looks a bit rubbish but has amazing design and people will still love it. It's very rare you get a game that looks amazing but is a crummy game underneath that people will love.
That's true.
There's nothing there. So actually, at the end of the day, I always kind of say design is king. I mean, as artists or craftsmen, whatever, I think that's a really important kind of message and lesson to learn. Like, if the design isn't good, no matter how good your art is, the game's not going to be very good.
Yeah, there's plenty of examples of games out there that have mediocre art, maybe, or like limited budget, but the design is so good that it captures the hearts and minds of players, while there's very few successful games that look super beautiful but are boring to play.
Totally. And it's true of everything, like same with films and stuff as well. Like so anyway, yeah, that's my closing thoughts.
Well, thank you for the closing thoughts, Tom. It has been a pleasure catching up with you and talking about art versus design. And like always, if you're new to the channel, please check out the other Herding Cats episodes me and Tom have made. There's plenty, and there's also a lot of different artist interviews for you to go through if you want to dive into the minds and hearts of excellent artists and directors around the world. So that was it.
Awesome.
Click subscribe and likes and all that, and see you next time.
Bye. Cheers.